Welcome back to Bills in Business. I'm Laura Davis, founder of USLege, and today we're diving into innovation and how states like Texas are helping define the next chapter of global competition. We're joined by Megan Mauro, the CEO of the Texas Association of Business, as well as the Texas chapter president of the American Innovators Network. Megan plays a huge role in Texas, working with entrepreneurs, business leaders, and policymakers to make sure the state thrives. So today we're going to be talking about everything from attracting investment, protecting consumers, preparing people for the workforce. So Megan, welcome to the show.
Megan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast again.
Yes, thank you for having me, Laura. It's good to see you, and I love the setup. It looks great.
Thank you. Well, I started this podcast in your office.
I know.
So
the good old days.
The good old days. So great memes and great to have you back. And in also a new role. So would love to hear just about what you're doing now and these two new big roles that you're in. And if you want to share with the audience all the updates you have.
Absolutely. Well, it's so great to be here, Laura. Thank you for inviting me. I am the interim president and CEO of the Texas Association of Business. So while that's a new title, I've been here for 5 years. And then I was also honored to be appointed to serve as the chapter president for Texas for the American Innovators Network. And so wearing both of those hats today, but as we'll discuss, the missions merge very well.
Oh, absolutely. And great hats. Congratulations again. And excited to chat with you today about what you're working on and all the things and those organizations and what you do. So let's start with some big picture. For people who aren't familiar with the American Innovators Network, what is it?
So it is a coalition and association of the startups, the entrepreneurs, the little tech companies. And they really have all come together, and it's really that voice on the national level.
When I was looking at your website, I was excited to see the slogan was "Greatness starts in a garage," just because for me in little tech, we started an apartment, and I know like so many people, in Silicon Valley, in Austin, and all the big tech hubs, people are starting companies all the time, and they have very different priorities than what you're seeing on the big tech side as well. So what are some of those big differences now, having seen the business side with Texas Association of Business and then also seeing little tech? What are the biggest differences you're representing?
Okay, so there's actually more there's more alignment than differences, and so that was what was so exciting about being asked to serve in this position to represent Texas with AIN. So during the legislative session, we work with our Tech Means Business Coalition, which TAB started 5 years ago now. And, the point behind that is coalescing around issues that we all deal with. And so we noticed that, or I guess it was a goal for us to include more little tech in the conversations on policy, because if you really think about it, big tech a lot of the times opens up the door for little tech, and big tech companies became big tech companies from being little tech companies and starting in their garage. So the more unity, the better, and the more we can come together, the better. So I think the role of serving the Texas chapter with AIN, and then my role with TAB and leading the Tech Means Business Coalition merges perfectly, and is really what we need to maintain our strong, competitive environment here in Texas, which we're seeing all the time, people coming here to start businesses, or people living here and starting businesses.
Absolutely. And this is such a watch for founders out there. You need to be listening in to see how this association, this group can help you, because a lot of times I'm talking to founders who they're saying, yeah, we have a very heavily regulated business that we're going into. And those can be some of the most lucrative companies to start. But you really have to monitor what's going on in the regulatory side to make sure you can actually work and you don't get, bureaucracied and like legislated out of a business. So how are you helping kind of those companies? Do they come to you and express, some of their pain points and problems for you to advocate on behalf of them? How does that work?
When we're talking about emerging tech, there is a difference with regulating technology and regulating behavior, right? So what does that mean? And that's something that we really work on through our Tech Means Business Coalition at TAB. And I think just because we're in this territory that we've never really been in before, it's kind of like, there's a great article, and Senator Ted Cruz is an author of it. It's an op-ed, and I think it was in the Wall Street Journal several years ago, but he compared it to like when the internet was becoming a thing, Well, how do you regulate that, right? And what we've always said is if a human, if it's against the law for a human to do, it's against the law for a computer to do. So here we are in this world where little tech companies are breaking into an industry doing innovative things that maybe haven't been done before, and then trying to understand the regulatory environment there. So we help bridge that gap. And then it's also like having little tech and big tech working together is really helpful for everybody, right? Because you can understand, maybe what hurdles these tech companies that have been in the field for a long time have gone through, and what has worked and hasn't worked. But it's all about regulating, I really do think, the behavior instead of what the technology does. Because at the end of the day, if there's an intent behind it that's against the law, don't punish the innovator for an unintended consequence, right? So we have to walk that line, and that's something that both organizations, I think, share that goal.
It's an exciting time because there's so much new coming. I mean, the next 10 years just with AI advancements and people being able to monetize that in different ways. So I'm excited to see. With this, how many chapters have started around the U.S.?
I'm not sure, but I know that they picked a couple of states to start. And of course, Texas was top of the list because of, our pro-business climate and the big impact that we have not only in the country, but globally.
Of course.
Texas is always first.
What do you think makes Texas different to other states in its kind of innovation?
Our business climate, and so we really value economic development. We have a great pro-business regulatory environment, and that is a core mission of TAB's advocacy work, is to protect that. And so, we're a state that if you're looking to start a business, you look at Texas and think, we're going to welcome you and we're going to make it easy for you to start that business. Some other states don't do that, and we don't want to punish people for being successful, taxing them more for being successful. Cough, cough, California. Just kidding. Kind of. And so it's really our regulatory environment, so that's really important. And as technology changes, the infrastructure across the board is something that we need to be taking very seriously in policy and advocacy conversations. And historically, we've been really good at that, and we're going to continue to be. And that's why Texas is attractive to do business.
There's a new market that's emerging for us, and that's actually founders who are starting out companies that don't yet have the budget for lobbyists. And they are, in the boat that I was in a couple years ago. And this is our platform is used for that purpose. So I'm just curious if you know more on how this association started. And my understanding is I think it was a venture capital firm that helped launch it in San Francisco. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. And they operate on a national level because if you think of it, their states can have all of these different laws. And tech, that's the last thing tech companies need. Little, big tech, anyone.
Right.
This is the regulatory framework needs to be on a national level because tech works across state lines. So yeah, it was VC, started by a VC guy. I think you know him. And
Yes.
And it's really a national organization. And so I'm really proud to be serving and representing on the Texas level because, as I've mentioned, it just ties in so well with the work that Tech Means Business does, with our mission and our core purpose at TAB as well.
Love it. Yeah. Shout out to Anderson Horowitz for doing this. You mentioned Texas just leading in innovation, and you've seen it over the last 5 years at TAB. So in your role at TAB and across the years, you've been there for 5 years. You've also just seen it change so much. What do you think has been the biggest, factor in the change and the growth that we've seen in Austin, specifically in the startup world, but also just with companies that are moving here across the board?
Yeah, well, I think keeping up with innovation. And so a lot of it has to do with streamlining government efficiencies, right? And so we saw this really in 2021 after COVID. And so with people not being able to be in the office, it was stuff that the governor had waivers for, to do, well, one of them's margaritas to go, which everybody loved. And now it's codified in law, but also filing different things electronically with the comptroller's office. And so that stuff kind of came to light and it was codified in law. And I think that's really, really relatable to tech issues and emerging technology because there's better ways to do something, or you realize like, hey, this is a company wants to do this or that, and this is kind of where they're being held up. And our state is really good. Our state lawmakers are really good at making sure that we're making it easy to do business here and removing any, I'm blanking on the word.
Red tape? Regulation?
Yeah. And so I know that's like a national trend, but we have really been doing it for a while. And so that is why it is important for these little tech companies to have a voice, big tech companies to have a voice, any company to have a voice, aka, an advocacy group, a lobbyist, because everyone's doing business and focused on that. And the last thing you want is, some government inefficiency to get in your way when you're trying to scale at an extremely fast rate here in Texas. And so we have a great landscape, we have a great regulatory landscape. And so continuing to keep up with the change of pace and how companies are innovating.
A lot of people kind of overlook the real collaboration between business and government. Mm-hmm. And so you're at the forefront of that. What do you really see? How do you see it all working together? Like how much input and impact do you think like a small tech company can have, big tech company can have, just in keeping government up to date with really what's going on out there?
Yeah, well, I think working together as a team, because laws are drafted quickly and laws are passed quickly. And the last thing you want to do is have 3 different tech companies, for example, in this case, be working towards the same thing but having different recommendations. It just confuses the people working the bills, and it confuses other companies. So when you can come in and say, hey, I represent this group and this is what we do. We represent tech companies, really companies of every industry, of every size, like TB and Tech Means Business. It's not just tech companies. It started that way. Now it's grown to over 90 plus companies. And then we also, AIN is a part of that as well. So not only are you representing big tech, but little tech, and we all agree that this policy change will make Texas an even better place to do business. And so that's really the power of, being aligned and of a coalition.
And you spoke to, big tech, little tech, and what's going on in Austin. Can you speak to what's going on in the rest of Texas, like Rio Grande Valley, Houston, Dallas? How is it changing, and what companies are you seeing come here?
Yeah, well, everything's changing. And I think what gets overlooked a lot of the time is it's not just tech companies, big tech, little tech companies. It's traditional infrastructure companies, because when these data centers are being built, there's a traditional manufacturing that has to happen behind that creates a ton of jobs to make the switchboards that data centers use. And then even when you look at SpaceX, that whole infrastructure and supply chain in South Texas has completely grown. I was going to say blow up, but that sounds weird with SpaceX. But no, it's completely changed the landscape for the better. And these are traditional companies that have been in business both on the state and binational level. And so that's something that we'll be working on to make sure that we're highlighting that appropriately, because it's not just the high-tech companies, it's traditional manufacturing, which create a lot of jobs that are high-paying jobs. And so it's an exciting time.
Oh, absolutely. I can feel it, being here. Have you done any work with other states or at the federal level as well, kind of keeping up with what's going on, or just working with the federal government? There's some things obviously that need to be regulated at the federal level. Mm-hmm. It can't just be state. So what are you seeing there?
Yeah. So, obviously the president has his executive order. And so we are having our TABDC fly-in next month. And we're having meetings about that and what that looks like from some of the leaders that are here in Texas, DC, right, that represent Texas. And I think that's some of our questions for them, like what should be regulated. And we need to bring that back to our members and say, okay, look, here's the consensus. This needs to be regulated. How does it work operationally in your company? And what are solutions that we can come back with that don't stop business or don't keep you from innovating, but meet the needs of what consumers want to be regulated?
And then as it pertains to the American Innovators Network, kind of what approach to policy conversations are you having starting out? You have a year before the legislative session in Texas. Where are you starting there on the policy front?
So the American Innovators Network is a part of Tech Means Business. And so we have a handful of different priorities, and that's really one, maintaining our, pro-business climate here in Texas, which benefits their members as well. But also, I think back to your point about federal oversight, I mean, some of these things really have to be on a national level, and it's going to take people working together to make sure it's the right fit to keep America first and leading on the innovation side.
Absolutely. And when you're looking at the unintended consequences you were talking about earlier, how are you kind of educating lawmakers and even getting the feedback from these companies? Are you, doing a marketing campaign to different founders? How are you kind of sourcing the new companies that are starting out and getting their input?
Well, having them engaged in conversations, right? So we have a lot of meetings with our members of all sorts. And I think that and kind of a trick on coalition building is not really a trick, but you can look at bills that were proposed that didn't pass and really put your businesses to work and say, okay, if this was not a bill that was suitable for your business, find an internal expert and tell me why. And let's make sure we're relaying that message appropriately and accurately, and that we're, in agreement as well, or share that same operating practice. But you always want to be solution oriented. And so I think that's a good way to do it, because it's easy to point out things you don't like about a bill, and it's not as easy to come forward with a solution. So I think just starting that process early, and that's kind of a way that we've done it in the past.
You have been so boots on the ground with a lot of these things. I think we actually met. You lobbied me on a bill. I think that's actually how we met.
Privacy.
Yes.
And it was a good bill. Texas led the way.
I remember you saying to me, you were going through your list. You're like, okay, this is a great bill. This was a great bill. I don't like this one. Anyway, we keep going through. That was funny. But I remember that. And it stuck with me, kind of the impact you had. And so what are some real world examples that you can give that are, a company that said, okay, there's a really ridiculous piece of legislation out here. It's going to impact so many people. And I don't think that the lawmakers necessarily know how many unintended consequences there are for this potential change. Do you have just an example that you could give where the lawmakers saw, oh, this is probably not the right way to go about this, now hearing from industry?
Yeah, and not to get into specifics, but I think this will give you a good idea. There was a bill to regulate technology to protect consumers, right? So people using the technology. And since this is technology we're talking about, it's very common to have like a period if the technology doesn't go the way that it's supposed to. You have like 30 days to fix it, right? So it doesn't happen again, and you're not being punished for, unintentionally having something not go the way that you built it.
Sure.
Right? The mechanisms behind it. But since this law was getting really into the details on regulating a technology broadly on how it was used, it actually was allowing that period to happen if current law would have stayed how it is, since it was a behavior that was against the law, there wouldn't be that 30-day period. Does that make sense? But now, since you're regulating technology that someone's using to falsely communicate with, a child, then now they're protected by a 30-day window. Whereas if the law wasn't, and this law didn't pass, but it was just a provision in there. And that was even something that we always want, that provision in there. And then I thought, wait a minute, this wouldn't even, this is already against the law. And if this bill passed, then they would kind of be off the hook for 30 days. So it was an unintended consequence that wouldn't work out well for the consumer. But let me give you another example. So another one is, okay, so the unintended consequences really for business happen when there's good intention, and there's always truly, I believe, good intention, right? Regulating this technology, and we want to protect, for example, data privacy, consumers' data, which I want that protected.
100%. Yes. Big.
And so, but then what happens is it's over-regulated, and then it could cost the business a ton of money to, one, retroactively enforce these compliance measures, or just enforce the compliance measures. And then overall, the product isn't as good because now you're spending resources on compliance that maybe not is even protecting your data in the way that it was intended to.
Sure.
And then two, you can't allocate those resources to expanding, creating more jobs and whatnot. And so I think it's always helpful to ask the companies, and that's our job. Hey, what measures do we already have in place? How does it protect consumers? Take it to the lawmaker. This is what we're already doing. Do you think you could make it better? Yes. Okay, well, here are some ideas on how to regulate that, you know? So it's kind of a process, but
You're great at building coalitions. So it's good to get consensus, it sounds like, from as many people as possible when you're making these big moves to change policy.
well,
sure.
it's because the issues are important. So, you know, it kind of, you can't build a coalition if people aren't interested, if the policy issue isn't important. And so that's what I've just noticed with these emerging tech policy issues. Everyone cares about them, even,
Sure.
you know, data privacy, AI regulation. Everyone uses AI. We have been, companies have been. So it's not just the tech companies. So you get everyone at the table.
Absolutely.
Your skin gets thick. It's not just the lawmakers.
Yeah.
Us too.
Well, speaking of AI, I mean, it is changing everything, and every company is using it in some capacity. If you're not, you should. Makes you more efficient for sure. So with that said, how is TAB really helping with workforce readiness? This is something that we're hearing all over the board. AI is developing faster than we can keep up with. And I mean, for us, you know, for me, I spend a bit of time every month talking to my co-founders and making sure we're up to speed on the most high-tech tools that we can use to be efficient. And I look up all the time. This is a hack. This is a tip for anyone. If you have a task you do not like doing, go on your method of AI, whatever that is, and say, here's all the tasks I don't like doing. Is there software that can do this for me? Because I guarantee you can do most of it. Of the admin tasks, not the human tasks, not the influencing, not the talking, not the decision making, but just the very tedious cut and paste in a box. That probably can be automated. So with that said, how are we keeping people updated on that? Like, I have to definitely do a very serious concerted effort to make sure I'm staying up to date. What does TAB see as really that for people who aren't even aware of some of the change and keeping them up to date with what's going on?
So we so a few things. Whenever we have conferences throughout the state and we meet with our local chambers, so we oversee a chamber executive organization of over 200 chambers. And so chambers are small businesses. These are local chambers across the state, and we've been incorporating AI as part of those conferences to help educate small business leaders like chambers on, you know, best practices there, and to kind of how to scale and advance as efficiently and quickly as possible. But it's really the workforce stuff that we're doing is really in a different, it's like the market speaks to what you need. So for example, like in Abilene, you have all of these data centers, like the data centers there are just growing so fast, right? And so something that we do is we, in all these projects announced, is we go up there, we work very closely with the universities, but also the community colleges.
Great.
And then we host a roundtable with the employers. What jobs do you need? Because out of nowhere, and we saw it with Siemens in Fort Worth, it was just a manufacturing facility, and they created 700 jobs in 1 year. And these were technical jobs that we needed to help bring the community together and educate the community. Hey, there's 700 jobs open. You can make X amount, which is a good amount, right out of high school, and you need this skill and this training, and who does it in the area.
Wow.
So making sure everybody's connected, employers, community colleges, and that data is accurate and readily available. So that's really where we play the role on the workforce side, as opposed to like training people how to use AI more efficiently. But I think the data is a huge piece of it. And so we try to do that as best we can.
Well, that makes sense. The market speaks when there's new roles. And that's what's exciting about AI is that new companies are getting innovated, but new roles and new jobs are coming into existence.
And high-paying jobs. So I think that's a big misconception. I mean, we've visited some different companies that started out in someone's garage, and they can scale so fast with technology and the smart people that, you know, are inventing these things. And then you hear this narrative like, well, AI is taking jobs. And I have physically been in these different facilities where they're creating jobs, and I'm talking a lot of jobs in a short amount of time, and they're high paying jobs. I'm like, wait a minute, I need to be working here, and I can get trained to do this in a year or two. Like, what? I mean, so it's really creating opportunity, and I think that message is important for us to be sharing. I mean, sharing the story of business, it's personal. It's people's livelihood.
Yes.
Like, everybody wants a job. Everyone wants to be successful. And that's why Texas is a great place to be. So it's our job to share that story as well.
That's a great mission and a great story because, yeah, I think some misconception is that, AI is taking this job. I think the biggest piece of advice I give anyone, including myself, is we don't know what's going to be in existence in 5 years. And we have to be okay with not knowing everything that's going to happen and be adaptable. That's probably the best skill you can have in this time where, yeah, there might be something that you were doing that is no longer relevant or needed. You can go focus on some other things and there's new things you can focus on. So being adaptable is so important, I think, in this time.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some of your big focuses for this year for AIN and for TAB over the course of the next year?
Yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to being in DC next week. Next month. And, I think we'll get to have a lot of conversations on what AI regulation, technology regulation, and all of that looks like on the federal, national level. And then, we have so much opportunity in Texas. So we have so many exciting projects to work on. I really just think connecting all of the pieces, like with emerging technology, and as I mentioned before, traditional infrastructure and workforce. Like, it is truly fun to be a connector, and that's why it's fun to represent the Texas chapter of AIN and lead the Tech Means Business Coalition and work for TAB. I mean, being a connector makes a difference for all the reasons we talked about today, but I just think there's a lot of opportunity in Texas. There's like too much to do. We need more AI so we can do things more efficiently and quicker, but it's a great place to be. And, there's a reason for that. So I think there's a lot of fun projects to work on leading up to the 90th legislative session as well.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited for you and everything you're doing right now. So if you have one message just for policymakers, for founders, for companies, entrepreneurs, what would you give them right now in this 2026?
Wow. Well, I think just for companies, founders, be at the table. That's why TAB exists. That's why AIN exists. And for lawmakers, like, we're truly here to help. Genuinely, we want to be problem solvers. And so I think that's kind of my message, and incorporates, what we do at TAB, what AIN represents, and then also our work, with the legislature.
Be at the table. That's a really great one.
Yeah.
Any last words, Megan? Anything you want to share with the audience while they're here?
No, I don't think so. What about you?
Well, where can people come and, sit at the table with you? How can people get involved with TAB and how can they get involved with AIN?
Yes, so you can reach out to me directly. So my email is mmauro@txbiz.org. You can go to the Texas Association of Business website as well as AIN, but we would love to have you as a member of TAB, have you at the table for Tech Means Business, and we'll have a busy year leading up to the legislative session.
Well, thank you for your transparency. You've got a lot of enthusiasm. I'm excited to see where everything's going to go this year. And thanks for giving, everyone your email. That is very courageous. So I love it. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. See you soon.
See you soon.